Before anything else, let me ask you a question. Would you believe me if I told you that this little country is ruled by a sultan whose dynasty is older than the entire United States? And that sultan is considered one of the richest people in the world. Yeah, Brunei might be small in size, but wait until you understand the complexity and inner workings of this nation. And that's exactly what we're here for. So, back in the 14th to the 16th centuries, Brunei Darussalam wasn't just a dot on the map. Nope, it was a bona fide empire. This sultanate was a major power, controlling a massive area. We're talking about what is now Sabah, Sarawak in Malaysia, and even parts of the southern Philippines. Seriously, this sultan's reach was immense. It's why the current sultan is a member of one of the oldest continuously ruling dynasties in the world. How cool is that? A lineage stretching back centuries. Now, if you want to go even further back, historians tell us that Brunei was already trading with China and paying them tribute as early as the 6th century CE. It later had a moment under the influence of the powerful Majapahit Empire from Java. But the true peak was definitely the 15th to 17th century window. When Ferdinand Magellan's ships dropped anchor here in 1521, the fifth sultan, the Great Bolkiah, was pretty much the boss of almost all of Borneo and the Sulu archipelago. So what happened to this powerhouse? Well, the late 16th century brought a lot of internal squabbling over who got the throne, which is never good for stability. Add to that the problem of increased piracy, and, most importantly, the expanding reach of European colonial powers. And the empire started to erode. It was like a huge castle slowly being dismantled, brick by brick. By the 19th century, that sprawling realm was tiny, and you see these landmark moments of decline. In 1841, the Sultan basically rewarded a British officer named James Brooke with a huge chunk of territory, Sarawak, just for helping him put down a civil war. That single act set a new course for the region. Then, just 5 years later, they had to give the island of Labuan to Britain, shrinking Brunei even closer to the size it is today. Finally, in 1888, they officially became a British protectorate. It gave them security, sure, but it meant they were no longer fully in control of their own land. Skip ahead to 1906, and the British installed the residential system. This meant a British resident was there to advise the Sultan on nearly everything, except for Malay customs, traditions, and the Islamic religion. And you could say it's the classic colonial setup. The Sultan's still the head of state, but the British are running the government. Then came World War II, with Japanese forces occupying Borneo from 1941 to 1945. When the British returned afterward, the whole conversation shifted toward, okay, what's next for Brunei? The path to self-rule began in 1959. They got a written constitution and internal self-government, with Britain keeping control of defence and foreign policy. But things got tense quickly. In 1962, a planned move toward a more representative government was smashed by the Brunei Revolt. This was a quick, sharp-armed uprising by people who didn't like the monarchy or the idea of joining the proposed Federation of Malaysia. British troops helped suppress it, but the impact was profound. The Sultan, at the time, Omar Ali Saifuddin III, basically declared a state of emergency and hit the pause button on democracy. And you want to know the ultimate takeaway from that revolt? In 1963, the Sultan decided that Brunei would not join Malaysia, which was a huge decision. It made Brunei one of only 2 British territories in the region that opted out. Then in 1967, Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin III did something monumental. He abdicated. He stepped aside for his eldest son, the current ruler, Hassan al-Bolkiah. This move was brilliant because it kept the dynasty going smoothly, even though the former sultan still pulled the strings for a while. The final steps to freedom came when an agreement in 1979 sealed the deal. Brunei would become fully independent on January 1st, 1984. And just like that, the Islamic Sultanate was proclaimed. The new sultan immediately became the prime minister and took over a couple of other major ministerial roles. He later introduced the national ideology in 1990, Malay Islam Monarchy, or Malay Islamic Monarchy. So what does that mean exactly? It just emphasises that the country's foundation rests on Malay culture, the Islamic faith, and the monarchy. And honestly, political stability has been the name of the game ever since. Why? Largely because of the insane amount of wealth they sit on. Something we'll dive into in just a few minutes. So stick around. In the meantime, what do you think is the biggest lesson we can take from Brunei's journey from empire to independent sultanate? I'm curious to know what you think, so sound off in the comments section below. So, we just talked about the history, right? Well, now let's figure out where this incredible place even is. Brunei is a small, independent Islamic sultanate, nestled right on the northern coast of the giant island of Borneo, which is smack dab in Southeast Asia. It faces the wide-open South China Sea to the north, which is beautiful. But check this out. Brunei is completely surrounded on all other sides by the Malaysian state of Sarawak. But the thing is, Sarawak doesn't just surround it. It totally divides the country into two completely disconnected pieces. The western segment is the larger one, and that's where you'll find the gorgeous capital, Bandar Seri Begawan. Then the smaller segment on the eastern side is the Temburong District. So what does this country actually look like on the ground? Well, if you arrive at the coast, you'll find a narrow coastal plain. But if you start venturing south, the land quickly rises into rugged hills. The absolute highest point in the entire country is way down in the southeastern segment, Pagon Hill, or Bukit Pagon. This peak stands tall at 1,850 metres. That's about 6,070 feet. Besides this hill, Brunei is constantly drained by several rivers, all flowing generally northward into that South China Sea. The big ones in the western part are the Belait, the Tutong, and the Brunei rivers. Fun fact, the Belait is actually the largest river in the country. Over in that smaller eastern section, you've got the Pandarawan and Temburong rivers doing their job. And what about the weather? Since we're basically on the equator, you know it's going to be hot and humid. Brunei's climate is absolutely ruled by the equatorial monsoon winds. The temperature is lovely and warm year-round, and it usually drops to the comfortable mid-70s Fahrenheit, or around 23 degrees Celsius at night, and then climbs up to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius during the day. But seriously, bring your raincoat, because it rains a lot in the coastal areas. But if you head inland to those hills, it can get even crazier. It's generally heaviest between October and January, so plan your jungle trek accordingly. Okay, now for the part I love, the wildlife. Despite being relatively small, Brunei is a massive biodiversity hotspot. 3/5 of the country is still covered in untouched virgin tropical rainforest. Then, another fifth is secondary forest. These are ancient hardwoods creating a super complex ecosystem. In the low-lying swampy areas near those rivers, you'll find huge expanses of freshwater and peat swamps, and of course, those vital mangrove swamps along the coastline. So, what lives in all this green land, you ask? So many incredible creatures, that's what. We're talking about the famous proboscis monkeys. You know, the ones with the big noses, leaf monkeys, gibbons, sun bears, and the incredible hornbills. And yes, watch out for the reptiles, especially the massive reticulated python hanging out in the swamps and woodlands. It's truly like walking right into a live-action National Geographic special. So now we've checked out Brunei's mountains and rivers and seen its amazing rainforests. Next up, we're going to talk about how this tiny, fragmented sultanate became one of the wealthiest places on Earth. Let's be honest, Brunei is famous for being ridiculously wealthy, and that wealth is tied directly to its unique political structure. Remember how the Sultan maintains absolute power. This system is what historians call an absolute monarchy, and Brunei has famously resisted decades of global pushes toward democracy. The Sultan, Hassan al-Bolkiah, has this incredibly well-entrenched autocratic rule. His power isn't just because he has guards, it's anchored in 3 key pillars. First, an expansive welfare state, meaning citizens are well taken care of. Second, his personalised rule. And third, that national philosophy we mentioned, Malay Islam Monarchy, or Malay Islamic Monarchy. Basically, the whole structure is built around the idea that the Sultan is the ultimate, legitimate authority. And it's a system that has proven remarkably resilient. So how does a country this small afford a welfare state that keeps everyone happy and stable? That brings us to the money. Brunei's economy, simply put, runs on oil and gas. This black gold has made the country incredibly rich. And just to give you an idea of the scale, the country's GDP was estimated to be around $15.46 billion in 2024. That might sound small, but for a tiny population of over 460,000 people, in 2024, It translates to one of the highest per capita GDPs in the world. So the outlook is positive, though things are expected to settle down to a more sustainable pace of 2% growth in 2025 and 2026. Now, what about prices? You might expect high inflation in a boom economy, but it's actually the opposite. Headline inflation has been declining, and it's expected to stay really low, averaging below 1% per year in 2025 and 2026. This reflects lower food and energy costs, which is great news for consumers. But here's the interesting financial tension. Brunei has a very robust external position, meaning it has a huge amount of money coming in from foreign trade, resulting in a large current account surplus. However, that surplus is shrinking a bit. In 2024, it was a massive 14.6% of GDP, but it's projected to decline to 11.5% of GDP in 2025. Why? Because global energy prices are softening, and the demand for imported services, like transport and travel, is widening their services account deficit. On the home front, the government is actually running a fiscal deficit. Wait, a rich country running a deficit? Yes. The deficit widened to 13% of GDP in 2024 and is expected to increase further to nearly 13.9% in 2025, also due to those softer global energy prices. They finance this deficit by tapping into huge fiscal reserves, which is like having an enormous savings account. This is smart because it prevents them from having to take on external debt. Now, the future of this wealth hinges on one thing: diversification. After all, you can't rely on oil forever, right? That's the key challenge, especially with global trends like energy market volatility and the accelerating global shift toward decarbonisation. And Brunei knows this. That's why they are seriously ramping up investment in the non-oil and gas sector. They're seeing strength in trade, air transport, and communication. They're also heavily backing major projects, like the expansion work on the Hengyi petrochemicals plant, which is scheduled for completion around 2029, and work to raise capacity at the Brunei Muara port, set to finish in 2025. Exports of petrochemicals and fertilizers from these projects are going to be crucial for future GDP growth. So to keep the economy going up and up, the government is also focused on important policy goals. They're trying to strengthen the flexibility of the labour market. They're also pushing micro, small and medium enterprises, or MSMEs, to embrace digitalisation and innovation. And critically, they are trying to foster green innovation to be prepared for that decarbonised future. It's a fascinating balancing act between old-world absolute monarchy and modern financial management. Now, are you ready to see how all this money and power plays out in the daily life and culture of Brunei? But first, you have to understand where this culture comes from. It's mainly rooted in the old Malay world. It's that huge region encompassing the Malay archipelago, and is part of what we call the Malay civilization. Over centuries, Brunei's culture has been influenced by four major periods: animism, Hinduism, Islam, and the West. But if you're looking for the single deepest, strongest root, it's absolutely Islam. Islam is so deeply ingrained here that it's more than a religion. It's a way of life and the foundation of the state's whole ideology. As I said earlier, the country's official philosophy is Malay Islam Beraja, and the constitution dictates that the national religion must follow the Shafi'i school of Islamic teaching, which is part of the Sunni sect. So really, the Sultan isn't just a political leader, he's the religious leader too. Now, while most Bruneians are Muslims, they practice a devout but largely tolerant brand of Islam. Religious freedom is protected by law, which is why other faiths are practiced here. Buddhism is the second largest religion, and Christianity after that. Because of this Islamic foundation, daily life revolves around religious duties. Muslims must pray 5 times a day: dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and evening. Friday is the Muslim holy day, so everything closes. Many government offices and companies also close on Sunday and Saturday afternoon. And if you're visiting during the fasting month of Ramadan, you'll see government staff working shorter 6-hour days, and most entertainment and sporting activities are temporarily suspended. A quick note on rules: alcohol is completely banned from the country, though pork is allowed for non-Muslims. When interacting with Bruneians, you'll definitely notice that politeness is a must. This ties into the crucial cultural concept of face, which is all about honour and avoiding public shame or embarrassment. To maintain face, communication here is very indirect and can feel ambiguous to someone from a more direct culture. And the reason behind this is that they're trying to protect your feelings and your social standing. So, expressing strong emotions like anger or impatience is usually avoided because it could cause disharmony and make someone, yes, including yourself, lose face. As for language, the official language is Standard Malay, which was put into force with the signing of the 1959 Constitution. However, because of the country's rich history and global trade, it's a melting pot, meaning English is widely used as the language of business, work, and secondary or tertiary education. You'll also hear Chinese, Indian languages, and native languages spoken by minority ethnic groups, but you don't see that diversity in language only. You'll also find it in their food. Just like its neighbours, traditional Bruneian food relies heavily on rice or noodles, often served with a side of meat and vegetables. Their national dish is something truly unique, ambuyat. It's this sticky, bland dough made from starch harvested from the sago palm tree. You shape it into a ball using a special bamboo fork and then dip it into savoury, sometimes spicy, sauces. It's super fun to eat. In the arts, Brunei is richly endowed with cultural heritage. They've been famous for centuries for their traditional crafts. The Arts and Handicraft Centre is a living testament to preserving skills like boat making, intricate silversmithing, bronze tooling, and most famously, exquisite cloth weaving. You absolutely have to see their famous brocades, the kain tenunan, woven with golden and silver threads. So that's Brunei Darussalam in a nutshell. Pretty interesting, right? Now, if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely love this next one.